The software development lifecycle is a process for designing, developing, and testing high quality software in the software industry. It is a process that produces software with the highest quality and lowest cost in the shortest time possible. It is a detailed plan that explains how to build, maintain, replace, and change or improve specific software. The industry's most essential and widely used SDLC models are Waterfall model, Spiral model, V model, Iterative model, Big Bang model. Through this course, we will explore the Waterfall model, which is also the first process model to be introduced. Linear sequential life cycle model is another name for it. It is the simplest, easy to understand life cycle model. So put on your thinking hats and let's get started with this session on waterfall models. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I want to request you to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any new update or video releases from Great Learning. If you enjoy this video, show us some love and like this video. Knowledge increases by sharing, so make sure you share this video with your friends and colleagues. Make sure to comment on the video for any query or suggestions and I will respond to your comments.
Hello learners, welcome to the tutorial of Waterfall model. My name is Gaurav and once again I welcome you to all to Great Learning. Now moving to the agenda, first we'll be knowing what is SDLC. So SDLC stands for Software Development Life Cycle. Next we will see why it is required, what is the need of SDLC. Moving ahead we will see the SDLC process. So SDLC process is having a different phases starting from requirement gathering and analysis. Next we are having designing. Moving ahead, the next phase that we are having is coding or implementation. After that, testing, deployment, and then at last maintenance. And we will see the detailed analysis of each phase of software development life cycle. Along with that, we will see different types of software development life cycle models such as waterfall model, spiral model, and many more. So now let's see what is SDLC. So SDLC stands for Software Development Life Cycle. So now before moving to the formal definition, what is SDLC? So I will give you the little bit idea about SDLC. So SDLC tells basically what are the procedures you have to follow in order to develop a software. Now let's come to the formal definition. Software Development Life Cycle, which is also known as SDLC, is a process used by the software industry to design, develop, and test high quality software. So what is software development? Software development means you are developing a software. Then coming to the life cycle is nothing but it is having the several components that we will discuss ongoing further. So SDLC is a process used by the software industry to design. So let's take the example of a company. So basically company will be developing a software, right? And they will test high quality software. So what do you mean by testing here? Testing means whether your software is working properly or not, right? And whatever the software you have made, it is matching up to the standard or not. Now coming to the second point, the SDLC aims to produce a high quality software that meets or exceeds customer expectations, reaches completion within times and cost estimates. So now let's understand this statement by understanding the example. Let's suppose we are having two companies, company A and company B. Company A is a client-based company, whereas company B is a service-based company. So company A, which is a client-based company, is having a certain requirement that they cannot make. So they will call the company B or they will contact to company B and they will tell about their specification and they will also tell about the requirements that has to be done in the project. So they will provide all the information about the requirements and according to that, the service-based company will work on that project and after working on it, they will charge some amount to the client-based company. So in this way, software development life cycle works. So basically what you have learned from this example. So we have learned that there is a company which is having a certain requirement. So they went to the service-based company. So whatever the requirements that has been given by company A now has to be fulfilled by the company B. And in return of that, they will charge some amount of the money. So in this way, software development life cycle works. So basically every company who are in the software development, they have to follow these procedures. So this is the basic idea about the software development life cycle. So now we will see why SDLC is required. So when I am telling why SDLC is required, that means what is the need of SDLC. So now moving to the first point, it gives a defined view of the entire system, resources, timeline, and goals. So basically SDLC gives a detailed view of our project. That means how and in what way you can execute your project. So in order to execute the project, you have to follow the life cycle. So this is the meaning of the first statement. That means SDLC provides you the detailed view of your project. Moving to the second point, design reviews help to ensure the reliability and quality of the final product. So let's take an example of two companies, company A and company B. Company A is a client, whereas the company B is the service provider company. So client wants to make the project, but he doesn't have any idea. So he will give the project to the service provider company according to their specification and requirements, right? So once the project will be delivered by the service provider company to the client will cross-check the project designing, its planning, developing along with the testing. So these are the things that help to ensure the reliability and quality of the final product, right? So now moving to the third point, enhance control over large or complex projects. So let's take an example to understand in a simple way. Let's suppose that you are having a project which is very large, right? And you are implementing here SDLC, right? Software Development Life Cycle. So this project will be completing sooner, right? And if you are not implementing SDLC, then it will take a lot of time. So let's take a scenario that if a company is using the SDLC, then the project will be over in just 3 months. But if they are not using, then let's suppose it is taking more time and it's taking 1 year, right? So what will happen here? So here you can see that in the second case, we are not using SDLC, right? And this will take a lot of time and your client will not be happy. And in this case, the amount will also not pay to the service-based company, right? So we can use the SDLC to complete the project faster. Also, your project will be also effective by using SDLC. So the next point that we are having, it involves comprehensive and explicit steps. So it means there shouldn't be any error in the project. So let's take an example. If a client is happy with the service-based company, or let's suppose that company A is happy with the service-based company, right? So they will talk to their parent company and the neighboring country about the service-based company, that is company B, right? So the company B will be getting a lot of services, right? And then in this way, they can earn a good amount of money that will also increase their revenue. So this is the overall idea about it involves comprehensive and explicit steps. So remember that SDLC has to be followed, right? So now it provides goals and deliverables that meet the standard of each party involved in the project. So basically it means that client as well as a service provide company must be happy. So when the client will be happy, when its requirement has been fulfilled, and when can the service provider company will be happy? When the company will fulfill the requirement of the client, right? So now moving ahead, it requires keeping detailed documentation throughout the entire process. So SDLC has to be followed in the detailed documentation, right? So when I'm telling about detail, that means it should have the documentation, right? So now let's take a case scenario. Let's suppose that there is a company A, once again, which is a client, and company B is the service provider company. Now, client A is having some certain requirements and they have given the project to the service provider company. And after whatever the specification that has to be done in the project was done by the service provider company, and they have hand over the project to the clients. Now, client finds some errors, right? So they will ask the question to the service provider company that, hey, we have find this error. What's happening? Can you show the detailed information about this? So let's suppose that if a service-based company doesn't have a detailed documentation, so they don't have any written proof, right? But if you are using the SDLC and if you are having the detailed information that, hey, we have done these things and these are the errors, then we contact with the developers and they have find out some solutions, and these are the implementation, and this is the best way from which we can go ahead with this project, right? So here you can see that if you are having the proper documentation, then you are having the written proof. If you are not having, then you can't say that, yeah, we have done this thing in our project and these are the implementation. So this is the basic idea about SDLC, why SDLC is required. So now moving to the last point, easy evaluation of costs and growth of the developed system. So let's take a scenario once again of company A and company B. Company A is the client and company B is the service provider company. So the client went to the service provider company and then asked, hey, we want to make this project and these are the requirements, right? So whatever the requirements that client has asked to make the service provider company, if they can fulfill it, then it's good. So whatever the requirements the client has asked to service provider company, if they make it, so after this, what will happen? There will be post evaluation for that, right? So the post evaluation is too much important for the client as well as the service based company, because it will be effective for both the company's growth. Also, all the software development company or the IT companies follows the SDLC. So now we were talking about software development life cycle, but we didn't know the software development life cycle process. So now it's time to understand SDLC process. So here you can see that we are having a picture in which a road has been constructed. So now if I ask you a simple question, what all things are required to construct this road? So the first answer that will be coming into your mind is raw materials, right? We need charcoal, we need white paints, we need barriers. So the first step of this SDLC is raw materials requirement. The second one will be your planning. So when I'm talking about planning, that means how much this road will be wider, what's the length of this road, and how many places this road will cross, and along with that, what amount of white paint will be required to cover all the roads, right? So after planning, we are having designing. So once the raw materials requirement has been done, planning has been done, the next step is designing. So under designing, it depends on you whether you want to construct a road of 2 lane, 4 lane, 6 lane, or 8 lane, right? And at what position you want to put a barrier as well as the breakage. After that, we are having construction. So if I ask you a simple question that if you are not having raw material requirements, if you are not having planning, if you are not having design, can you directly jump to the construction? Answer will be no, right? Because if you want to construct a road, you must have a proper planning. There should be a raw materials, right? Along with the design. Then only you can do the construction, or else it's not possible to do the construction. So always remember that first three steps has to be followed in order to do the construction, right? So in construction, obviously we're gonna construct the road. Next, we are having testing. So once the road has been constructed, then only we can do the testing. Now, I will ask you why testing is important. Let's suppose that we have built the road, right? And let's take a circumstances that there is a rainy season, and because of rainy season, there is a pit on the road, right? So we have to do the testing at that particular time, right? Because without testing, you can't open the road for the public. So testing is the basic necessity, right? So once the testing has been done, then it will be open to public, right? And once the public will start using this road, obviously there has to be maintenance, right? The maintenance may be around 6 months or after 1 or 2 years, but you have to maintain the road. So let's suppose that after some time there are a lot of pits on the road, so you have to do the maintenance. So maintenance is also required. So you can see that clearly by seeing this picture. If we want to construct the road, then we have to follow these steps. Now, if I'm talking about the software, now you can imagine that if you want to build a software, then you have to go step by step, right? You can't directly develop a software. So there are SDLC process that every company follows. So there is a SDLC process that every software development or IT companies follows. So now let's see each phase of software development life cycle in detail. So let me just write here SDLC process. So the first phase that we are having here is requirement gathering and analysis. So just let me write here requirement gathering and analysis. So what happens in this phase? So in this phase, all the relevant information has been collected from the customer to build a product according to the customer expectation. So the relevant information is gathered first here, right? Or you can say that is collected from the customer. So let me just write here from the customer. So as soon as the relevant information is collected from the customer, business analyst and product manager set up a call with the customer to gather the information like what the customer want to build, what will be the end user, what will be the purpose of this product. Because we know that if you want to build the product, then there must be a core understanding and knowledge about that particular product, right? So now let's take an example to understand in a better way. So let's suppose that if there is a customer who wants to have an application related to transaction, right? So what will be the requirement here? Because our requirement must be clear here, right? So now talking about the requirement here, what kind of transaction will be done, how it will be done, with which currency it will be done, right? So this is the example. Now, once the requirement gathering has been done, now analysis will be done to check the feasibility of the development of a product And if there is any ambiguity, then a call has been set up for the further discussion. Okay. So once all the requirement has been clearly understood, then the SRS document has been created. Now you might have a doubt, what is SRS document? SRS document is nothing but it's software requirement specification document. So this document should be clearly understood by the developer. Also, it must be reviewed by the customer for the future reference. So this is the first phase, that is requirement gathering and analysis. So now, after understanding the first phase, that is requirement gathering and analysis, let's jump into the second phase, that is design. So if you want to understand this phase, let me give you an example of house. If you want to construct your house, then you need a blueprint or design. The same goes for the software. So here in this phase, architect will start working on the logical design of the software. Okay, so let me just write here logical designing of the software. Also, in this phase, SRS document is created. Now, what is SRS document? SRS stands for System Requirement Specification. So, what is the specification and requirement of the system, right? So, talking about SRS document, it will give us the logical details such that how your software will look like, which language is used, what's the database design, and this will give you basically the prototype of the final product. Okay. So that means like whatever the software you have developed, you are having all the prototype in the form of documentation here. So this is the basic idea, but let me give you some simple explanation. So basically, design phase, it includes the design of everything that has to be coded. So it includes the design of everything that has to be coded, right? So this is the basic idea about design phase. So the next phase that we are having is implementation. Let me write here implementation, or you can say coding. So we have already seen the two phases of software development life cycle. The first phase was requirement gathering and analysis. The second phase was design. And now we are going to know about implementation or coding. So now let's discuss about this phase. So as we know that once the design document is ready, then only developer can go for the coding, right? So as soon as the developer gets the design document, he will start coding. Now, here in this phase, the software design is translated into the source code, right? As we know that here we are doing the coding. So the whatever the software designs are there, it will be translated into the source code. Also, all the components of the software will be implemented in this phase itself. That means all the components will be implemented in the coding phase, right? All the components of software will be implemented in this phase itself. So this is the basic idea about implementation or coding. Now, the next phase that we are having is testing. So talking about testing, when testing will be done. So once your coding has been done, then only you can do the testing. So let's take an example. Let's suppose that you are having a product, or you can say that a developed software. So once you are having a developed software, then it has to be tested, right? And while testing, if you find any defect or any error, so once again, it is assigned to developer to be fixed, right? Also, in this phase, testers also check the SRS document to verify that whatever the software that has been developed is meeting the customer requirement or not. So this is the basic idea about the testing. So the next phase that we are having is deployment. As the name itself suggests, deployment, that means deploying, right? So now once your software has been tested and there is no error, it's a bug free, there is no defect in the software, then it is ready to launch in the market and it's available for the users. So once the deployment is done, and after that if we found any error or any bug, then also it can be re-evaluated by the maintenance team, and once again it will be redeployed with the new version. So this is the basic idea about deployment. Now next phase that we are having is maintenance. Now let's see. and discuss about the maintenance. So the last phase that we are having is maintenance in SDLC. So why do we need maintenance? Because maintenance is necessary to eliminate errors in the system while working live, and it is also used to tune the software. So in simple words, maintenance is used to remove errors so that your software can work properly. Now let's take an example to understand in a better way. Let's suppose there has been a software which has been developed and has been deployed in the market. So there will be a lot of users that will be using that particular software, and there will be users feedback also, right? So the maintenance team will look into that particular thing. Now maintenance team also looks if there is any bug that has to be fixed, or if there is any upgrade or enhancement in the software, it is looked by the maintenance team. You can take the best example of WhatsApp. So we know that WhatsApp has been already deployed in the market, but we can see the regular update, right? Once if you are opening your mobile phone, you can see that you will get the regular notification that please update your WhatsApp, right? So this update and enhancement and bug fixing has been done by the maintenance team. So this is the overall idea about the software development lifecycle process. So now let's see different types of SDLC models. So the first type of SDLC model we are having is here waterfall model. So it is a very basic model, and it is also referred as linear sequential life cycle. So what do you mean by linear sequential? It means your next phase will be start only if the previous phase has been completed. So let's take an example. This is my first phase and this is my second phase, as we know that, right? So once our first phase will be completed, then only the second phase will start. And also the output of the first phase will be treated as the input for the second phase, right? Similarly, here the output of this phase will be treated as the input for this phase. So in this way, this model works. So that's why we tell it's a linear sequential life cycle. Along with that, here there is no overlap of two phases. So when I'm talking about, let me write here first, no overlap of phases. Because the reason is simple, right? The first phase will be executed, then only the second phase will start. So one by one, the process is going on, right? So there will be no overlap. Now, so in the previous slide deck, we have already discussed about the requirement analysis, system design, implementation, system testing, system deployment, and system maintenance. So talking about requirement analysis, so what are the requirements of the customer, right? So whatever the requirement is there, it will be gathered and then analyzed. And once we got the final requirement, so it will be the input for the system design. And system design, basically the prototype of the final product. So design gives us the prototype of the final product. So now talking about the prototype, how will your software look like? What are the specification and requirement? Everything is in the documented form, right? So once the prototype has been prepared, then the developer will start doing the code, right? Based on seeing this prototype of the final product. After that, once the software has been developed, it will go for the testing, right? So once there will be no error in the software, then it will be go for the deployment. That means users can use this software now. So as the user will be using the particular software, there will be some positive as well as negative feedback, right? So whatever the negative feedback are there, it will be taken care by the maintenance team. So whatever the enhancement, upgradation, or if there is any small bugs, it is fixed by the maintenance team. So these all are the phases, right? So this is the basic idea about the waterfall model. So just remember that it is a linear sequential life cycle and there is no overlap of phases. So these are the 2 points that you have to remember, and rest these all are the SDLC process which we have already learned in previous slide decks, right? So now let's see the advantage of waterfall model. So the first advantage is easy and simple. So as you can see that this model is really easy to understand and it's very simple, right? Because it is a linear sequentially life cycle model. Second, it is good for the small projects. So if the small project is having a requirement which is having a proper clarity, then using this linear sequential life cycle model, we can make a good small projects. Okay, now coming to the disadvantages. The major disadvantages of this project that it can't be used for the complex project, or you can say that big projects. Why? I will tell you the reason. The first reason is that for the big project, there are a lot of tasks that has to be worked concurrently at the same time. And this model is a linear sequentially life cycle, right? So this will work one by one, one by one. So it is not good for complex and big project. Along with that, and also it can't accommodate changing requirement. So let's suppose that there are certain requirement that has been given by the customer initially, and the waterfall model has been started, right? In between, if the customer comes once again and telling you that you have to add this particular requirement, then we can't work on this model because we can't go back, right? And if you want to work on the next phase, then the previous phase has to be completed, then only you can come to the next phase, right? So this is the basic idea about the waterfall model. So now let's understand about the spiral model. So spiral model is having four phases. We are having here planning. So let me just write here planning. Then we are having the next phase as risk analysis. And the next phase we are having here as engineer. And at last we are having here evaluation. So now coming to the first phase, planning. So planning includes requirement gathering. So let me just write here requirement gathering. Okay, let me just write here planning. So what will happen here in the planning? Basically, so as I already told you that planning includes requirement gathering, where required information has been gathered from the customer, right? And then it is well documented. So the documentation is in the SRS. So what is SRS? It is nothing, as I already told you, it's the software requirement specification. So this SRS document is created. Let me just write here software requirement specification. Okay, so this SRS document is created and it is used for the next phase. So the next phase that we are having here is the risk analysis, right? So basically what happens here in the risk analysis, whatever the risks are there is identified, right, from the solution, and then risks are also resolved using the best possible strategy. And at the end of this quadrant, prototype is built. So what is prototype here? Prototype is nothing but the design of the product. Moving to the third quadrant, we are having as an engineer here. So basically, once your risk analysis has been done, then coding and testing are done. So now coming to the last quadrant, here the customer will evaluate the developed software and then he plans for the next iteration. So now after knowing all the four phases, that is planning, risk analysis, engineer and the evaluation, let me just give you an idea a little bit more about spiral model. So let's suppose that this will be our loop. This is nothing but a loop basically. So what will happen here? Here the requirement gathering will be done. Then in the second quadrant, the identify of the risk and the resolve of the risk has been done. Then moving next, we are having here the engineer in which the coding and testing has been done by the engineer. And at last, product evaluation has been done by the customer. So if the customer is satisfied here, right, then it will stop. So let's suppose that your customer or the product manager is not satisfied and they have given the certain feedback or there is some modification that has to be done. So then we can go for the next iteration. Similarly, once again, when we are coming to this fourth quadrant, that is evaluation, once again, the product manager and the customer is not happy. So we can go ahead with the next iteration, or else if it is fine, then there is no such modification is needed and it will stop. So in this way, the spiral model will work, right? So this is the basic idea. So now let's see the advantages of spiral model. So the first advantage of spiral model is nothing but the risk handling. So spiral model is the best model to follow due to risk analysis and risk handling at every phase. Coming to the second point, it is used for large project since risk can be identified and resolved, right? The third point is very simple, that is flexible. So let's suppose that in between the phases, if there is any change in the requirement or if there is some modification that has to be done, so this model can follow the iteration, right? And then we can modify the developed software. Coming to the fourth point, customer satisfaction. Since whatever the requirements are there, if it has to be modified, then we can go for the next iteration and our spiral will be also increased at that time. But the risk will be minimized and it will be a satisfactory for the customer. So this is the basic idea about spiral model and we have seen advantages. So now let's see the disadvantages of spiral model. Okay, so talking about the disadvantage. So the major disadvantage is here the cost. As you know that once we are going through all the phases and at the evaluation, if the product manager or the customer is not satisfied and if they have given the certain feedback, then we can go once again for the next iteration. And then also if they are not satisfied, then we will go for the next iteration. And in this way, the cost will be increased. So the cost will not be effective, right? Okay, so this is the first point. So the next point that we are having here is the complex. So spiral model is much more complex than the waterfall model here because here we are dealing with the large project as we don't know. Let's suppose we are going with the first iteration and if there is any modification is there, then we'll go once again for the next iteration. So it will be more complex here. Also we don't know the time estimation because in between if there will be any changes or any modification that has to be done. So time taking will be more here, right? So this is the basic idea about the spiral model. So the next model that we are having is V model. So V model is also known as verification and validation model. So let me just write here verification and validation model. So if you see here the diagram is in V shape, right? And also the left side of V is nothing but it is known as verification phase and the right side of V is validation phase. So I'll just write here validation phase. So now let's understand each phase. But before going further, let's see the difference between V model and waterfall model. So in waterfall model, testing was done, but at the end phase, right? So this was the major drawback. But here in V model, testing will be done along with the development. So basically, development and testing will be done parallelly here, right? So let's see this phase. This is the requirement analysis, right? So once the requirement has been done, BRD document has been made and it will hand over to the client, right? It will be given to the client. So once the BRD document is hand over to the client, it will be going for the system testing, even though the development hasn't been completed yet, right? So what is system testing? So in system testing, the entire system is tested. That means the system functionalities are tested here, right? Moving next, we are having high level design. So high level design includes design and planning of algorithm, of pseudocode, flowchart. Now at the same time, it will be going for integration testing. So what is integration testing? So in integration testing, the testing will be done on the integrated modules, right? So while integration testing, if there is any problem in the design, then you will get to know, right? So moving to the next phase, we are having here detailed design. So now talking about detailed design here, the coding has been done, modules and sub modules are created, or you can say the entire project has been created, and now it will be going for the unit testing. So what is unit testing? So basically, in unit testing, sub modules are tested. So now, what are sub modules? So let's take an example. If you are creating any project, so the project will have sub modules. To understand in a better way, let's take an example of home. If you are constructing any home, then you will be having different sections, as in you will be having a hall, you will be having a kitchen, you will be having a study room, right? So by creating section, you will getting a more space, and you will go easily from one section to another. The same goes for the project. So the project will have different modules, or you can say the sections, right? Let me write here 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So what will happen in unit testing? This module, that is this sub module, will go first for the unit testing. Similarly, once it is over, then second module will go for the testing. So basically in unit testing, testing is done in pieces, one by one here. So the entire project, let's suppose this is the entire project. So let's suppose that if you are not using unit testing and if you are doing the testing, then the entire project will be tested and it will be taking more time. But once you are taking unit testing, there is a testing of the sub modules, right? So it will be easy to do testing and the time taken will be also less, right? And here if you see, then we are doing the testing of the detailed design phase. So basically here the unit testing is done in detail. Now coming to the last phase, that is implementation. So once the implementation is done, you don't have to do testing. Why? Because in V model, development and testing are done parallelly. So you don't have to test again here. So this is the basic idea about the V model. So now talking about the advantages of V model, it is simple and easy to understand. So the second point is that it is good for small projects where the requirement is defined. So you can see that development and testing are done here parallelly, right? A small project where requirement is defined. So now let's see the disadvantages of V model. So this model is not good for ongoing projects. So coming to the second point, so here if the requirements are changed at later stage, then this model is not suitable, because once the requirement is changed for the later stage, the cost will be too high, right? If you see here, whatever the analysis has been done and BRD document has been created, at the same time the testing has been done, right? So if you are going for further later stages and at that time there is change in requirement, so the cost will be too high at that time, right? So this is the basic idea about V model. So let's take a quick recap for the waterfall model. So we have started this tutorial by understanding what is software development life cycle. Then we have seen that why it is required. And after that, we have seen the SDLC phases. So we are having different types of phases that we have already covered. And at last, we have seen the different types of models such as waterfall model, spiral model, along with the advantages and disadvantages.
If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, I want to request you to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any new update or video releases from Great Learning. If you enjoyed this video, show us some love and like this video. Knowledge increases by sharing, so make sure you share this video with your friends and colleagues. Make sure to comment on the video for any query or suggestions and I will respond to your comments.